Hello, bookish friends. I hope you're ready for a potentially very long video. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to film this all in one go, but we'll try. Y'all voted that rereads is what you wanted the most to see, and yeah, up until about 5 years ago, I was a really big rereader, and then I discovered BookTube. First with Chantel's channel. She introduced me to Shatona's books and then her book channel, and now for about every 2 or 3 books I read, I put about 4 books on my to read list, so I have no hope of ever catching up. And I kind of miss rereading. I miss immersing myself in a book so much that I can almost imagine having conversations with the characters and such. So I thought I would start with the books that I reread the most in my teens and 20s and then go from there. It looks like I have historical fiction on top. First we have Boston Jane, an adventure. This is set during the early settlement of Washington State. Our main character, Jane, is it Jane? Yes, Jane. She's from Philadelphia. Her father is a doctor. She falls in love with a young man, and he goes out to Washington State and asks her to marry him, and she goes to follow him out there, gets there, and he's not there. He's gone off to do something, and so she is forced to adjust to rough pioneer life by herself, waiting for him to come back so she can marry him. I really enjoyed, I'll try not to say I really enjoyed this one after everyone. I did discover in my 20s that there are 2 more books in the series, and I've read each of those as well multiple times. Very boring cover, but this is Constance. Then I have Constance. This is a fictional diary of the settlement of the Plymouth colony, and she starts, I think, in her teens, and it covers about 7 years of her life as she moves from England to America and surviving the sickness that claimed a good chunk of the people who came on the ships. And sorry, keep getting interrupted. Forgot where I was. Anyway, this covers about 7 years of her life as she goes from teen to when she gets married, and the character was actually one of the people who settled in Plymouth. Then I guess I read a lot of fantasy. I read historical fiction and fantasy as a teen a lot. I did not like any books that had like cars and stuff in them. I have The Blue Sword by Robin McKinley. I actually still like to read this every once in a while. What can I say about it without giving any spoilers? Hari goes out to live, I think, with her brother. She leaves her homeland to travel east to Istan, the outpost of the Homelander Empire, where her brother is stationed. Yeah, so she goes out. She lives with kind of a surrogate family that you could think of as ambassadors. I think it's supposed to be English colony of some made-up country in the Middle East, and there's magic and horses, and I really love this book. Now we get kind of more specifically into fairy tale retellings. I have The Storyteller's Daughter. This is my favorite, Cameron Doki. This is a reimagining of Scheherazade and her life and coming up with the tales that she told the king so she could avoid being beheaded. And I have Beauty by Robin McKinley. She was one of my favorite authors. It's my favorite Beauty and the Beast retelling. I don't know what more I can say about it. And then I have two Cinderella retellings. I have Just Ella by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This is Ella after the ball, training to become a princess before her marriage to the prince. I still reread this book every year or two. It's my favorite Cinderella retelling. Ella is cursed by a fairy to always be obedient, and that gets her into trouble. I do appreciate that she and the prince meet multiple times before the ball, and they even exchange letters back and forth, and it's a great opportunity to get to know both the prince and Ella better. What's next? I need my cheat sheet for this because my next category is my comfort reads. And these are books where if I can't sleep, if I'm feeling particularly anxious, which I do, anytime we're like getting ready to travel or while we're traveling, it's always at least one night where I just can't sleep without basically having a panic attack. And these are the books that I pull up on my Kindle because we live in a small house, and so I can't have a reading light. And I pull up these books and read them on my Kindle. I kind of go back and forth between praying for people in my life and reading these books. And so like I said, most of these I have on my Kindle. Although I have a couple of them both in Kindle and physical. Snow Cross Letters by Stone Having. This is a winter book. They're getting a snowstorm and Izzy rips open a package, and it's not the historical fiction book she had been anticipating. It's a book on rocks. Then she figures out she got someone else's package, and exchanging the packages leads to exchanging notes, which leads to more. And I really like this one. Another one of Shatona's I really like to read during those times are Random Acts of Shyness. This one, poor Heath. Whenever he tries to talk to a girl that he thinks is pretty and would like to date, he just spouts off random facts about animals, like their bladders and how long it takes them to pee and mating habits of chimps and dung beetles. And I actually like the animal facts that are in the book. I want another book with Heath in it. And also books of Shatona's that have the potential to reach that status are Twice Told Tales and Clock Tower Bound. I've read each of these at least twice, and these are in her Bookstrings series, which the character that overlaps is Milton, and his job is to kind of restructure and save businesses, but he is a bookworm at heart, and he cannot bear to see bookstores close. So kind of between his paid jobs, he does pro bono, I guess, of trying to save bookstores. And this one, Harper is a bit of a prickly character. It took me a second reading to really warm up to her. And Clock Tower Bound is more about restoration of a friendship, because there's two friends who have a falling out. They each have their own bookstore, and the town really cannot support two bookstores. So these have potential. Another one of my favorite authors is Kate Stradling. I really like reading her Soot and Slipper, which is, again, a Cinderella retelling. I really like the twist in that book. Another one of Kate Stradling books that I really like is The Heir and the Spare. This book is quite dark, but the good guys win and the bad guys get their comeuppance, and I just feel like it's one of those books where the light wins. And then again, another one of hers I really like to reread is Deathmark. This is like a, if you like Ellen Montgomery, it's like a Blue Castle retelling, but with a plague. And the people who get the plague get these marks that gradually become more and more visible, and the main character, she contracts the death mark, and she decides she's not going to live the last year of her life serving terrible people. So, my stack's gonna fall. My next category are other books. Woo! My next category is books that I just have read multiple times. And I have The Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin. It's a World War II historical fiction that has bookstore. What more can I say? I think this was my favorite book of 2022. And yeah, I've read it a few times. And I love that the community rallies with the influence of books and the bookshop. And I guess while we're on the World War II category, I guess, I have the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. So this one takes place right after, well, about a year after World War II, I think. And it starts with a guy being like, I got your used copy of such a book. Do you have recommendations for other books to read? And that starts a correspondence and turns into the woman going to Guernsey and telling the story of what happened on Guernsey during the German occupation. I have Flight of the Raven. All of the Ravenwood saga is good, but this is the one that I tend to reread the most. The premise of the story is Lady Celine, her family has a gift that actually most people think has died out, and they use their gift to assassinate people, and she's not okay with that, so she has to figure out how their gift is actually supposed to be used and how to defy her. It's a kid. She's okay. How to defy her family and put a stop to the twisting of their gift. I have Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is my favorite Austen. And starts out as kind of a doormat and ends up kind of asserting herself and finally becoming the woman she was meant to be. And I mentioned The Blue Castle. I do love this is maybe my favorite Montgomery. I reread this every couple of years, although I read it last year, and I guess I'm going to read it this year with Chantel's read-along of Montgomery's works this year. And my last stack are books that I would like to reread soon. Maybe this year, maybe not. I have 6 of them. I could do one a month and try. I don't know. Because I'm also rereading Montgomery's works this year. So fitting in 2 rereads a month is, we'll see. But I have Parnassus on Wheels by Christopher Morley. And my copy has the lovely etchings in it. This woman and her brother end up kind of moving out to the country and having a farm, and then her brother becomes an author, and he gradually is spending more and more time out in nature and wandering far afield to get ideas for his books, leaving her stuck doing all of the farm work. And then this guy shows up with like a gypsy cart that's a bookstore and wants to sell it to her brother, and she's like, no, you know what, I will buy it and I will run off and try to sell these books. And he goes along to teach her, and it's just another one of Morley's lovely pastoral books, and I want to reread it. And then I have 2 books by Molly Rushmeyer. I don't know if she's written any more books than this. This was her debut, The Bookshop of Secrets. I really wanted to like it, but it seemed kind of like she was trying to shove too much into one book. And I'm not sure if there is a typo in here, but it says in the very first chapter that it's April. But the whole thing is she's trying to get this mobile bookshop going before the season turns cold. And I'm like, what? So I don't know if this was actually supposed to take place in April or if it was a typo and it's supposed to be August, because that makes more sense to me. So I want to reread it, see what my thoughts are a second time. And also the lost manuscript. I should say this one has a bookshop and the owner has dementia, and so when she turns up to claim her mother's books, they don't know where they are. So she helps organize the bookshop to try to find her mother's books. And then the lost manuscript is they are kind of on a treasure hunt to find this lost manuscript. The next one I have is Operation Lionhearted by Mary Beth Barber. I think this was an independently published book. The main character, Lindy, she's a refugee. Most of the royals and nobles from her home planet were massacred, and then she's later asked to return with the remnant of royals who were not killed to negotiate with the dictator who has taken over. And I have The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp. I think I've talked about this one a few times. It was my favorite book of 2023, and I've only read it once, so I'd like to reread it to make sure it lives up to the 5-star rating. Mrs. Kipp, she's in hospice, and a cub reporter, as what she thinks is punishment, is sent to write an obituary about Mrs. Kipp, but really her editor is trying to teach her to dig deeper and to find stories, and I really enjoyed it. And finally, I have Kingdom of Ruins by D.C. Marino. I think this was another independently published book, and it's a portal fantasy where I forget what they're called. History does not rest. Each archaeological layer speaks to the living generation, carefully choosing its friends and enemies and its kings. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I would like to read it again. I don't know if I'll get to all of these this year, but yeah, it's been fun to talk about some of my favorite books. Hopefully I've helped you discover some new ones to try or some new favorites. Well, let me know what some of your favorite books are, and until next time, happy reading!